think I'm going to use some Daniel Smith quinacridone gold. This is a violet, perylene violet. What about a quinacridone burnt orange and a perylene violet? Let's put that in there. And since we want nice juicy brush strokes, I'm going to decide to use a brush that's going to hold more water. So I'm thinking about my squirrel quill. Or even this little cat's tongue. That might be fun. So let's go ahead, get some color here. I want a nice amount of water in there so we have some transparency. These are going to be my stems, my stalks, whatever we call that. I'm going to turn my brush like that. Also, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about, is this brush going to work for what I want? Is it big enough? Do I want to switch? This one's a little too big. It's going to hold a lot of water and color. It might hold too much. In fact, I think it does. Has some green in it. I'm going to go back to that little cat's tongue, that little medium. And I don't want to get carried away with too many little brush strokes. And I'm also getting a feel for the paper. Let's tap in some color there. Also, to give it that real loose feel to it, I'm going to lift it up at a slight angle. That way we'll get some puddling of color. I like what's happening. This is on that fluid 100. I like the little blooms that are accumulating here and there. What's nice is that we can be sloppy. I'm holding my brush higher up the handle. And let's see if I have one. This one's a little, this is a medium, and this is a 1/2 inch, a small one. Let's try the larger one. That holds more water, so it's going to bleed and accumulate. I'm going to take a little bit of that quinacridone burnt orange. Let's try that in here too. Since it's fall, this is holding more water than I think I want, and then we'll have a lot of drools that I may not necessarily want in this right now. It would be maybe really out of control. Okay, so I'm getting a feel for this. I'm going to take a little bit of that perylene magenta, or what do we have it? It's the perylene violet. Let's throw that in there, see what we think of this. That's kind of nice. I'm putting this more towards the bottom. I like how it mingles down here. And I'll take this same color and let's think about getting it down into those vines. I'm touching the very tip of the brush to the paper just so I can get a feel for where I may want to put them. And I want them to be gnarly, so that's why I'm just barely touching the paper. We'll go ahead, and I'm thinking I'd like to pull it up there, but if I press too hard, that's going to be a little whiter than I'd like, so I'll just leave that alone for a second. I'm trying to have a little bend in there and take advantage of that water moving down into that area. Okay, so I'm liking the brushes that hold more water for what I'm trying to do here. So for what I'm trying to do here, I really want to use some brushes that hold more water. This is a Isaby number 1, I believe. It looks awfully small. Oh, let's see. Yep, it's a 1. All right. And let's see. Let's go ahead and try to give it some little vines that pull off to the side. I could switch over and using some blue. That's the other thing I'm thinking about right now. But I think this will be all right. Okay, so I'm liking how this is developing. And I'll want to get some other little, maybe vines in the background. So I'm going to just pop those in there, in those empty spaces back there. Now this is starting to dry. It's a very arid day today, so we're not having a drying problem. And let's see. Take some of that quinacridone gold. I'd like to get more of that richness in there, so I'm going to go ahead and we're intentionally creating some blooms here. And I would have liked it if this bled up here a little bit, but I think that that's working out nicely. So how about if we go ahead and maybe get a little bit of a blue sky. I'm debating if I want that or not, but we're going to go ahead and give it a try. Let's pull some blue in down here. I do like it on the white. And the reason why I want to do that is I'm thinking about trying to soften up some of those edges through there. We're just going to give it a try. I want this to be a very loose painting. And I'm going to lose some of those edges right there just by touching them with a little clean water. And then let's think about this area down here. We'll take some of our mingling color, throw it in here as our dirt. And tap a little bit. We don't need to go too wild with our tapping. And I'd like to get the shadows in, but it's going to disappear here. So I'm going to think about the shadows on the vines. And I'm thinking, which brushes can I work with where it's not going to hold too much water and color? I'm going to go ahead and go to my French ultramarine blue. I'm debating on that. Is that the color I want to use? Or a cerulean? Let's try that. Since I have it in my palette. I could also try a Windsor blue. And I like that what's happening up here. That's fun. Let's see, what if I take a little bit of that Perylene and throw that? I don't know if I'm going to like that. That's okay. But I'd like it to be bluer. Let's throw that in. This is drying. I'm going to go ahead and try to get some of those shadows in. Again, just playing with our brush stroke. Allowing some of that color to run. And it's just fun playing with the colors and the surface of the paper. Changing the amounts of pressure. And letting that color bleed. Now, since my shadows are going in this direction, I'm thinking I need to get some shadows going up those vines right through here. also thinking that would be nice to get some grapes coming down through the bottom. And let's get some of this color. Let's pull some of this down a little further. Let's get some of that shadow color into the background. It's just a lot of fun playing with this. Now I could put another vine there. It would make more sense instead of having 4. So if I'm thinking about that, let's just take some of our vine color and let's make another line through here. Let's just break up that space. Could be a little bit fatter. Maybe another one over here. That might be too many, but that's okay. We're not trying to be perfect here. So I've got all this back here. I'd like to have my lighter colors in the foreground. I think maybe I'd like that to be a little darker back there. I'll take a little of that quinacridone magenta. I've got a big glob of this hiding in here. And let's try to add some depth in here with that looser style. I also think I need to do some layering on some, just breaking up the space here. I also want to get some grapes in here. I like those little blossoms that are happening in this area. And I'd like to get some darker values right through here. I like all this mingling. Those vines could be a little darker. I'm going to go darker with my values, meaning more color, less water. And I'm trying to decide, do I want to go golden or do I want to use the reds? Let's just see. I could pop in more of that quinacridone gold. That would be nice. I don't necessarily want to mix it in the palette. I'd like it to bleed naturally. And for some of those brush strokes, I'd like to just touch them with some water so they can dissolve, create natural blooms. Soften some of those lines. And to break this up without over painting this, I'm thinking I'm just going to spatter a little bit of color. Let's do that. Because if you've been in the vineyards, you'll know that a lot of those leaves have spots on them. So this will break it up. I'm touching the very tip back here and just trying to spatter. I'd like to get some little grapes in here. This could go darker so it's not the same value as this. Again, we're working on the fluid. I'm working on the fluid 100, so it's going to react a little differently. I'll take some, I can take either that Winsor Violet Dioxazine or I'll take a little bit of that Winsor Blue and some of that quinacridone magenta. I'm looking for a purple color. And if you know grapes, you'll know them more than I do. So some of those grapes can be purple, they can be different colors. So I'm just using my imagination. If you're more accurate, you can do that too. Let's get some grapes in there. It's kind of fun to play with all these different colors. You can even put some up a little higher. It's fun watching all those natural blossoms happen. Then what I'd like to do is I could add more grapes, but I'm going to go ahead and play with those leaves. I'm going to get back into the yellows and maybe have a lighter transparent dapple on top. Let's get some of those darker. Just breaking up the space through there. What if I went really darker? What I'm trying to do is give some weight to the bottom of this color, or these vines. Maybe soften a few of those brush strokes, not much. Then I want to come back into here, and yes, I'll use this. Thinking, do I want to use a brown or a purple? I'm going to use the same basic colors that I put in here, and I think I'll throw a little indigo into it. Let's try to get some of those shadows. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. I think it's too purple. But if we let some of that color run down, that can work nicely. And do the same thing over here. Gives you a lot of freedom. Just know that we want to keep the top lighter, we want to have a heavier bottom, we want some trunks coming down and shadows. You don't really need to look at a reference photo. Now again, I'm thinking about going back into those shadows. So I'm going to use all those same colors again. I'll use some of that French ultramarine blue, bring it in here, and just try to draw it down a little bit. And work with changing the amount of pressure that I'm applying to my brush stroke. It's a lot of fun. Then I'm afraid if I do anything else back here, what might happen, it's going to distract from this area, but what I could do, let's go ahead and do it. Let's try to break it up a little bit. Okay, I like this. I think I'll leave it alone. I'm trying to decide, do I want to do any more? I'll just splatter a little bit of color up here. I don't want to get carried away with it. And I'm thinking, do I want to get any more into the sky here? I think it's fine, but I would like a bit more contrast there. So I'm going to go into my blues, whatever I have here. I'm just going to mingle them all up together. Put them over on the side. I'd like to get a nice clean blue if possible. I have a cobalt blue that's, or a Verta blue that's a little too chalky, but I've just added it in. I should add more blue into my wells here, but let's go ahead and just use what I have. That way, hopefully it'll stand out more. Then let's soften a few of those edges. We have some contrast. And I think I'm going to call that done. Maybe I'll just add a few strokes down here so it doesn't look like those shadows are just sitting on top of nothing. And done. Then let's go ahead and put a mat on this so we can take a look. Nice and colorful. It's still wet, so I can't do anything with it. And now we have a really fun painting.